Good morning. My name is Candace Prince. I'm the president of Green Hope Project. We are so happy to have Phil Basehart here with us. So he's going to cover humanitarian projects with Earthships. And so I'm going to turn it over to the professional. So Phil, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you. And I love sharing this information because it's my favorite topic, basically. My name is Phil Basehart, and I have been working with Michael Reynolds and Earthship Biotecture since about 2002. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm much older than that. Since 1992. So I've got approaching 30 years of Earthship focus in my life. And I built my own house back in the 90s. And through that process, I sort of witnessed how an Earthship or this style of architecture can positively affect and change your life. Specifically, creating self-reliance. And so once I witnessed that and got myself into a situation where I was less dependent on government and corporate supplied utilities and all sort of the basics that we all need to survive, and creating that stuff for myself, I realized the power that would have around the world to free people from sort of the downward spiral, especially in places where people really struggle on all levels of existence. So that has kept me motivated to keep getting these examples out there and educating people from all over the world on how to become more self-reliant and less dependent on what the grid or the utility grid or corporations and government give to us, which are really just basic human needs. And I know Mike's talked about the 6 points and how this architecture provides the basic needs for survival. So, and I'm up for questions anytime, but I know I've only got about an hour. So I'm going to go ahead and go through what I've realized this morning and last night when I was kind of updating this, that we've been doing this kind of thing for 16 or 17 years. And so I'll sort of go through the chronology of that and what we've learned and how we're attempting to advance in like the transfer of knowledge and how we follow up on projects and things like that. All right, so the way we sort of see this is that here's a shot of one of our sort of kind of most expensive and best performing models. We call it the global model here in our community here in Taos, New Mexico. And, you know, it's costing $400,000 to $500,000 to get people in, you know, where they can just buy their way into this concept of self-reliance. But that is really guided, you know, by sort of expectations here in the U.S., you know, expectations with lifestyle and what you need to survive and things like that, and combine that with bank loans and codes and regulations. You know, it's can be very expensive just to walk into this self-reliant living model. And so we've been trying to develop over now almost a couple decades are models that are much more affordable and attainable for people all over the world without the finances that we're used to here in the U.S. And also, there's different belief systems, different expectations for what it means to survive. And so we're trying to create examples all around the world that fall into a price range that is maybe attainable by the majority of people around the world. So usually what we do is we come up with, this is just an example, we come up with a base design that can, on a budget, provide the 6 points, which again are thermal, solar, heating, and cooling, catching your water, creating your own electricity, building out of natural and repurposed material, containing your sewage in a zero discharge system, and then within that contained sewage, growing food. And that's what we've identified as the basic human needs. So here's a section view of an early design that eventually evolved to one of our first efforts that we did in India. And here it is in plan. And so we come up with sort of this way to house people in this self-reliant architecture, and then conceptually how we could build, a village of these individual modules. So that will bring us to India, and this was in response to the earthquake and tsunami, which happened, I think it was right around Christmas Day back in 2004. So it was devastating, and I think you all may remember it in the news. There was a very large earthquake out in the Indian Ocean, and then it triggered tsunamis sort of all around the region. And where we went was to the Andaman Islands, which is out in the Bay of Bengal. It is owned and controlled by India. And these islands got not only hit by the earthquake, which they were just north of the epicenter of that, but then the island we were on, Little Andaman Island, was swept over pretty much by 3 approaching 100-foot tall waves. So you can imagine an earthquake and 3 100-foot tall waves over a small island is very devastating to the people there. So within each one of these projects also talk like who, what, where, when, and why, and then the funding. And so this was one of our first efforts. And so the funding here was basically Mike, shown here, us gathering building material in dumps on the Andaman Islands in India. And this one, we basically just made a rapid response. We got a call from an Indian architect who said, "Hey, do you want to come and do a demo on Little Andaman, explain the devastation?" And we basically, within a week, Mike took out a bank loan from our local bank here in Taos, and he took out about a $30,000 bank loan. And then a week later, we got on a plane and made the multiple-day journey to the Andaman Islands. So we funded this one ourselves with a bank loan, and then kind of retroactively came back to Taos and had fundraisers to pay for the bank loan, which we realized wasn't a very effective way to try to do this. But here we are on Andaman Island, on Little Andaman, unloading materials to the site. And I do remember when we finally arrived there, it was just such a devastated disaster site. And I was pretty unprepared then for what we were about to experience, getting off the boat and just seeing, basically, everything was destroyed. And then we go on to camp out for 2 weeks and do this build. That all the people there had gotten moved into these temporary shelters on higher ground, which were offering a very low quality level of living up there with communal toilets and metal buildings that were just cooking in the sun. And people really had no choice. And the Indian government didn't want to give any loans for reconstruction unless you spent a period of, I think, 3 months in these camps. And the people did not see a lot of money donated, as government is corrupt and hangs on to a lot of donations, really is what happens. And so we were one of the few groups to actually get on the ground there and try to do something. So here we are, day one. We're going to build a circular building we refer to as a hut, and that would attempt to exemplify the 6 basic human needs as we see them. So here we are, pounding tires, and wasn't a whole lot going on in town. So you can see the crowds that would kind of surround us daily. And we're collecting garbage from all over the island. Here's Mike with a bunch of plastic bottles. And there's garbage everywhere after this sort of natural disaster. Unfortunately, on that day, 1/3 of the island's population died. And so we have people dealing with, a lot of personal loss and, just trying to make their way through it. Although very, very positive people, especially after what they had experienced. So here's the structure we made in sort of a Photoshop section here. We are catching water. I think you can see my little arrow here. We're catching water off the roof down through this gutter and then filtering the water a bit before it goes then inside the building. And we actually stored the water under the building in a lined cistern, and we brought the liner ourselves, and we brought a lot of tools with us too in our backpacks. Then all the other material though was gotten locally. And so you can see here we used tires, and then we went up with a lot of plastic bottles. Really, plastic bottles are everywhere, and there's sort of endless supply globally of single-use plastics. So then the walls of this building are built with that, and up here in the roof, we did some bamboo as well as over the floor. And then we insulated on top of that, typically with cardboard or some sort of repurposed garbage insulation. And then we roofed on top of that. And you can see we're cooling the space. So we have a thermally dynamic space with mass walls, an insulated roof. And then we bring in air over this cooler body of water, and then up into the building. And then the hot air up at the top of the building vents out of the roof. And so we have a constant flow of air that is cooled over the cistern, passing through the living space and up out of the vent, which is high up in the center. And there it is. That's pretty much how we left it. We did do an outdoor botanical cell, a lined cell for a toilet, or black water or gray water could go into that. And so within about a 10-day period, we did get a pretty nice example of expressing the 6 points here in the Andaman Islands responding to the tsunami. I mean, water was a big issue, and the government was distributing water in big trucks from the only well on the island. And most of the other wells, especially in this neighborhood where this building was, were spoiled by salt water because the waves had covered this whole area. And you see some of the trees in the background are still green, but they just hadn't died yet. I mean, basically all of the land was just saturated with salt water, which basically spoiled all the wells and killed all the vegetation eventually. And there's our small team. And this is the architect who invited us, and we just brought a small team, and then he brought a small team of locals. this was the the sign that they put up. And we always work with some of our bottle bricks, letting light in. These are just plastic bottles cut in half and taped together. You can see the interior with the bamboo, the matte flooring, and a matte ceiling above. And then above that is insulation to keep our masts nice and cool. These three women worked with us every day. They were super amazing. Worked very, very hard, mixing by hand and supplying almost all of the plaster and mortar that you can see in the building behind us. And they were part of the crew. And this is one of our early experiences of sort of how to share, if you want to call it technologies or, our methods, and how to sort of bridge the gap and get information to local people in a way that then they may be able to go on and utilize it themselves. So knowledge transfer has been something that we've evolved a lot over these 20 years. And in the beginning, we were not very good at it. All right, so then from India, and most of these responses were due to natural disasters that we're going to look at today, because we feel like, once there's a disaster and, all of the basic, there's no electricity anymore, there's no water anymore. So with no electricity, there's no way to heat or cool the home. You have no refrigeration, and on and on and on. I mean, you're basically left without any of these basic human needs. And so, our concept is to come into a disaster area and build these examples of self-reliance. And that way people can kind of hopefully get back to their normality, more quickly. And then in the end, when it happens again, because a lot of these places, there's hurricane season. It happens every couple years, every few years, they have a bad one. So to not just be lost as soon as these events happen, but to be able to still maintain all the basics. So here we are in Mexico, and this is in Matamoros, which is a border town with Texas. And this was in response to Hurricane Katrina. And so that was August 2005. Only about a year after the tsunami and earthquake in India. And you can see here in plan view, we're focusing in on, again, we're doing these circular buildings. Now, why are we always doing these? Well, these are this circle of tires with a concrete beam all the way around it. And then a dome on top is a super, super stable for seismic zones, and also very, very stable in hurricanes. So we're typically using this model when we're going to these places where we're addressing typhoons, earthquakes, hurricanes. And so you're going to see it again and again. So here in outside of Matamoros, they got completely devastated by Katrina. We don't hear much in the U.S. After Katrina about what had happened in Mexico, but this fishing village was basically swept, completely away by the hurricane. So we went in to create a safe space, an example of something that could be resistant or withstand even something up to the level of Katrina. So here we have two huts, and they're catching water, and here's a cistern in between them. And then we have a nice sort of central area with berms all the way around so air can pass over these structures. We have a central courtyard area, an open outdoor kitchen, which is pretty much how people cook, in hot climates. You don't cook inside, it gets too hot. So an outdoor kitchen, and then we have a utility space and a bathroom space. And all of this, just completely self-contained. Here is a section view of what we refer to as the hut or the circular building. And you can see there's an inner lightweight roof out of wood, and then an insulated cavity, and then the outer roof is 3 inches in layers of plaster on a cage of rebar. So super stable, and then winds can move right over this thing, and there's no edges or anything for winds to get under. Yes, this in this drawing, this operable skylight might blow away, but there's nothing that's going to blow away the basic structure here. And there is the winds of the hurricane moving up and over. Here's that courtyard area, and moving up and over this space. Now, a lot of these early efforts, we didn't do a lot of follow-up. And so what we've learned is that follow-up is really key. You know, when you go and you just drop this thing, you know, it looks like, you know, people are like, what is that thing? you drop this thing into communities and then you never come back. That's not very effective way to transfer knowledge. Now, you know, I've heard and we've heard that this structure has been used in storms since, and it is the most robust thing in town, and people run in there during storms, and it has created a safe space, which is good. But, you know, this thing never got far enough along to completely get all the systems in place and things like that. So we're not really in this effort showing, you know, exactly what our buildings can do. So here's the tire we're going up, and here you can see that concrete beam going around, creating the super stable structure. Here we have light being let in through the plastic bottle bricks, as we call them. It was a cool project too, because the crew, we built this side, and then every day there was a dump truck came in loaded with people from Matamoros, and then that team basically replicated what we did, and they were just sort of a day behind us. And that was a very effective way to transfer knowledge, in that they, you know, we're coaching them and everything, but, you know, and even with language barrier or whatever, still it's just easy to see, okay, here's what we did. Now the local team does this. And that was a great way to begin to transfer knowledge, but then never going back, never following up. You know, it's sort of that you drop the ball there. So there it is in the back. There's a cistern in between the two huts, and eventually catching water. Here's that rebar dome that I mentioned being built on the ground, and then we will lift it into place. There's some of our bottle bricks letting in light. There's that wood structure underneath, which then will be insulated on top and covered with this dome, and then plastered. And you can see the gutters starting to come about and directing water to the cistern. This was, as we move along in the project, this was going to be the toilet room or the utility space. So you can start to see the courtyard getting enclosed here. And so there's that coming up with burial around it. So, I mean, we got pretty far on it, but we never got the systems in place. Here you can see the location. That's a big shrimping community, actually. And again, you know, all these communities have these same problems. You know, where do we get fresh water? Where do we get electricity? Okay, a hurricane rolls through. Now, really, where do we get any of these things? And it's always just kind of sad to me that humans get themselves in such a fragile situation and being so dependent on entities that don't really have your best interest in mind, actually. Really, the electric company is really just trying to make money, as is the water supplier, you know. So being dependent on that, you know, just it's not healthy. It's surprising that humanity has kind of gone that way. So here's again the small team that we built it with, crew and some of the local crew towards the end of the project. Okay, so we'll go from there to Haiti, and this was in response to, just checking my notes here, to earthquake, and that was 2010, devastating earthquake, specifically in the city of Port-au-Prince. I don't know, you may remember seeing images of it. You know, Haiti's the poorest country in the Western world, and very amazing, strong, incredible people of Haiti. That earthquake, displaced thousands, tens of thousands of people in the city of Port-au-Prince, and you maybe remember images of people moving into these blue tarp, tent camps. And I think a lot of us may think, okay, well, this is a temporary situation for people, but no, it's not. It's not temporary. People are still living in these places. They were displaced from where they live due to the fact that wherever they lived was destroyed by the earthquake, and you're moving into tent camps, and it's not a temporary solution, actually. It's the only solution. So our idea is to go there, and on a fairly minuscule to us budget of about $4,000, can we get people into self-reliant, earthquake-resistant, hurricane-resistant housing built out of the garbage from the streets of Port-au-Prince and the rubble from the devastation of that earthquake. And so here it is in plan view. This is a 12-foot diameter circle built from tires. This thing has a cylinder, which is the toilet. It has a cistern to catch water in, and then it has another cylinder, which is the shower. We'll look at it in section, and then it has botanical cells that handle all the gray water from the shower and the black water from the toilet in contained beds that then within those contained beds, you can grow food. On a very small footprint and on a budget of between $4,000 and $5,000 is what we had in material on this. Here it is in section. So we go in around. Now in Port-au-Prince, there's no municipal garbage collection. So there is anybody that's been there. I mean, it's definitely shocking for us that is used to our garbage all being hidden in some landfill somewhere on the outskirts of town where we can't see it. Well, if there is no municipal garbage collection and no hiding it away, you basically, the normal people of Haiti have to just deal with pretty much, you can imagine in a dense populated area, pretty much just living with garbage. It's a fact of life. I mean, there's garbage everywhere. I mean, it's just piled everywhere. I remember in the city, there's these old aqueducts that are supposed to be running water. They're just piled full of garbage. There is garbage everywhere. It's a fact of life. So we are just pulling all this garbage pretty much just straight out of the streets and building this self-reliant architecture with it. So here you can see tire wall. I think we're all used to seeing that by now. But then we always have to insulate our mass. So what we did here in Port-au-Prince was then we built a wall out of plastic bottles all the way around our tire wall. And then we left a cavity of about 18 inches. And then we filled that cavity with single-use plastic, styrofoam, all crushed up. And that's how you create insulation, is little air pockets. So that whole cavity is filled with just, it almost seemed endless amounts of garbage from the streets, crushed and put into that, creating insulation. Same above the roof. We filled that with rice bags full of shredded styrofoam. And, it's just like here in the US. I mean, anytime you get a takeout anything from a restaurant or a drink or whatever, it always comes in styrofoam containers, and then they're just thrown in the street. So, we just go out and gather all that up and create insulation with it. So here's how that building shaped up. There's that hut all insulated with garbage and all the mass structure made with repurposed tires. That roof goes over the toilet room, goes into the cistern, and then there's the shower room, and there's the beginning of the lined zero discharge botanical cells. It creates a little courtyard area. We worked with a bunch of locals, which was super amazing. And, these people had just witnessed, friends and family perish in the earthquake, lost their homes, moving into tent camps. Yet what a positive group of people to work with, inspiring. Here's our small solar electric system, very small, but it is providing lighting. It's providing a little bit to pump water, and it's providing a place to charge your cell phone. So, in a very simple format, it's giving you all your electrical needs, and it'll be there after the earthquake or after the hurricane. Interior shot, letting light in through those bottle bricks. There's sort of that courtyard. You can see how many plastic bottles. There's an endless supply of plastic bottles globally to be used for insulation, as well as wall construction. And so that's what we're doing. So here we are in section. Let's look at how the water works. Here is the rain falling on the roof, going and getting stored in the cistern. And this is going to go for all these projects. It's very similar, very basic water systems. That cistern is elevated on a few courses of tires. So then you can take a bucket and place it under the cistern, and then just by gravity, turn on a valve and fill the bucket. Then you take that bucket into the space that dedicated for showering. And this is how people bathe anyway. This is a very typical method around the world, assuming you have a bucket, is to then take a bucket shower. Or I was instructed last time I was in Haiti, it's actually called a bucket bath. So you wash your body here in this space with that water, then that water goes into a contained line botanical cell. It's a gray water cell. And then with that small solar electric system, we have a little pump at the end of that cell that then we pump water up into the toilet cylinder. And you're using that water, the processed then gray water, which gets cleaned up by the filtration process of the botanical cell and the plants, pulling a lot of that water and using a lot of that water. But whatever's left, then we have a little pump that pumps into a bucket. And then you have a toilet on top of a homemade septic tank, which then overflows into a black water cell. And that toilet it's just the bowl of the toilet, not the back or all that stuff. We've learned that mechanical things eventually break, and then if there's no money to replace them, well, then it's just going to be abandoned. So here we're going to bucket flush this toilet and forget the whole float valve and the flapper and all that and the handle. You just have the bowl of the toilet. You fill that up with processed gray water, and then you flush your toilet with that. Then it goes out to a lined botanical cell, which you continue to grow in. So there's a shot of the roof, a little hard to see, but these are the gutters going across, and then there's the top of the cistern, and here is the top of the cistern. You always want to filter the water before it goes in. That's why there's this little lip here to catch some sediment, and then there's a screen over here. You want to keep light from coming in the cistern as much as possible too. That just breeds algae. So we're filtering the water before it goes in the tank. And then here is your showering room, right? With a little rock to set your bucket on or whatever. There is an example of the homemade septic tank, which we could build for just maybe $100 compared to $1,000 conventional tank, and repurposing tires in it as well. And so that is pretty much where there's a good shot of where we left our first effort in Haiti. All right, so moving forward, well, in every effort, here's an example of where, okay, we've got that module, right, of one of these circles and catching water and everything. And then once we have one thing, then we could replicate it. And the concept here was, let's get people out of the tent camps and see if we can replicate this self-reliant and sustainable approach to housing, and where we could even fit, approaching 200 people on a very small footprint of only 1.5 acres. So now we never got to do that, but that's always sort of where the thought process ends. Okay, so from the Haiti experience, we actually next went to Sierra Leone. Now, Sierra Leone is Western Africa. Very difficult place for people. These places are all kind of similar, and with 70% unemployment, hardly maybe one or two people in the extended family have jobs providing for the whole family. Just scraping by. Sierra Leone is one of these places. Here, though, we had a private donor. Now, the Haiti project, I should have mentioned funding. We funded that one again, just ourselves. We all, donated our time, bought our own plane tickets, came up with $5,000 or $6,000 for materials, and just went there and did it. Sierra Leone had a private donor, which was the only time it's happened, really. We didn't know who the donor was, but they wanted to pursue building a Waldorf school at an existing school. And the existing school was just in a tarp, like a stick and tarp structure. They wanted something more long lasting and substantial. And so we went and built what we call the flower design. And this is a series of classrooms where we have 8 classrooms, I guess. And it's a vaulted rebar structure, and it catches water on this one in the middle. And then out here on the perimeter of these little Y spaces, we'd have toilets and showers. And then this green belt all the way around is where we're going to contain all the sewage. And the early one, there it is in section. Ventilation is coming in from that central space where the tanks are. There you can see the vaulted structure, and then the septic and botanical cells indicated there. Here's a computer-generated image of it. Roof plan, cisterns in the middle, elevation. They're sort of beginning the structure and how the rebar and tire work is going to go. And there it is again. And I have a lot of images for this, so I'm going to have to kind of move through them quickly. But there it is. And we built, what did we do? We did 2 of these pedals, and then we did the little spaces in between. So we got in an example of a shower space and a toilet space, and then 2 classrooms. We had amazing local crew, which we trained. Let me just skip through a little bit of this, just trying to lay out the building. We had limited tools. We tried to ship a container there, which we learned, well, don't bother, really. All of it got stolen in customs. We had tile saws and sledgehammers and all kinds of tools and supplies, and we never saw any of it. Best to just work with local materials. Here's the awesome students of the Waldorf School making plastic bottle bricks here with a lot of our volunteers. And then we start pounding tires, and we didn't even have sledgehammers. So we're actually pounding tires with sticks. Although I did bring a sledgehammer in my backpack, so I had the only sledgehammer on site. But we eventually did get materials on site, and we did get this thing rolling. Of course, tires were easy to find. We didn't have cement in the beginning, so we had to lay our can work to form our concrete bomb beams in Adobe, and these are 2 of the teachers at the school. Everybody got involved. And so we did an example of 2 of these pedals, and then we trained the local crew, and then they actually took it from there. And so we were able to train them well enough. And here's the key thing, is that the anonymous donor had left enough money for the entire school to get finished. So we trained the locals, and then the locals went on to finish the building. And so that was very good. But then once that job was over, well, then that was kind of the end of Earthship building in the village. So it's that follow-up that we're sort of lacking on these projects, but the locals did, I'd say they actually did better. I'll show you what they did. Their construction, here's where Mike had kind of promised everybody a job, and all of a sudden the whole crowd erupted and started throwing us like up in the air and everything. I just have a few quotes here, but there's like the crew and the volunteers and the school kids. There's sort of everybody. You can see just a mob of people. But then we ended up training, and here's just a quote from one of the kids about the plastic bottles, and we just thought it was eloquently said there.
That's so sweet.
But there we are inside the space with the students, their first glimpse of it. And that's the one we did. And then here's the local crew that we trained. And then these people went on to build, and I tell you, do better quality work, I think, than what we did. I mean, look at the interior of that space. Look at that beautiful plasterwork here. They're getting ready for the floor. Went on and just artists really with minimal training went on to complete the school without us. So, when that can happen, there's in my mind, a certain amount of success there. But then the only thing is, well, then once the school was done, that was kind of it. But there's an ending shot of it. That is long after we were gone. And you can see how well the local crew did, doors and everything. All right, so that was Sierra Leone. Malawi, Central Africa, super rural village there. And these people wanted a community center is really what it ended up being. And also, I tell you, it seems like the women do all the work. I know I'm wrong there, but anyway, it was a space where they had talked about having sort of like a micro bank kind of thing where they could get loans to, and it was really focused on the women of the community to further their small businesses or craft businesses or food, sales, also a storage space, very rural area, and water, for example, here the water people, the women are the only ones who haul water that I saw, are bringing water up from the stream way down below in the valley and filling this tank for construction. But, this is like daily event, and nobody's catching water off of their roofs. So even just that concept would, and then eventually that water slows down to a trickle in the dry season down there. And I'm sure that some days there is no water. So the concept of catching water and how that can, change the daily lives of people. Also, containing sewage is huge. This is just a shot of, we're starting the septic system. I mean, the village situation is there's outhouses and the water sources down below in the valley below. And when the heavy rains come, they just wash all the waste from the outhouses into the drinking water is what happens. And then, people are only living to, maybe average lifespan is, unfortunately it's maybe 48, 49. And a lot of that is due to drinking polluted water throughout your whole life, and eventually, it just, I don't want to get too graphic, but, just like chronic diarrhea and always having these bugs in your system, eventually you can't survive it. So the concept of catching water and filtering it for good quality drinking water is very valuable here in Malawi. Okay, I just got to keep going. I see there's some questions, but I'm not sure.
It's comments about the amazing work you guys have been doing.
Oh,
And
Okay, well, thank you.
One of them says girl power.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I mean, I don't want to, but I swear in India it was the same thing. It seemed like the women were the ones that were doing it, and the men, I don't know what they were doing, smoking cigarettes. Anyway, but yeah, I hear you. Okay, so moving forward, Philippines. This was in response to Typhoon Yolanda's 2013, I think, or 2014. Start to lose track. But this is direct response to that. And the concept here was to build what we were calling the wind ship. And let me just back up. And so these are two U shapes. They're not circles this time, facing each other, and then having a central area that's actually kind of a public space. And then you could potentially link these things together and have sort of wind ship avenue, so to speak, that then is a shelter during the times, but still will give you all the basic needs. And boy, I mean, I've been to a lot of disaster areas, but this one, it was in a populated area, and just seeing, like, I think an oil refinery, which I saw on the way to the job. I mean, just, what the refineries look like. I mean, massive steel storage tanks. And I mean, just absolutely, you couldn't even hardly tell what was going on, what it was. So really devastating typhoon. So we partnered with a local nonprofit, and I should mention that we generally do always partner with a group that's on the ground, and that's already embedded in the community. And usually they're the people that contact us, and then hopefully they have this already, established trust, which is a big thing, and presence with the local community. And then hopefully they're going to be there beyond us, and, hopefully continue their work, which doesn't often happen, but that's the idea. And really that trust is really tough to do. You can't just come into a community, build this thing, and then leave and create a sense of trust in the community. And we've learned that you really this follow-up is absolutely key. So there's what we did in the Philippines. Lauren just told me I need to go faster. So it was successful in that we did create these spaces that are typhoon proof, as well as it's a nice shot of Mike, as well as worked with a bunch of locals, teaching visitors how to make these spaces and be safe.
You guys document this so well.
Yeah, we are lucky. I generally try to bring some kind of videographer, photographer who's a volunteer, and we try to get these images because they're kind of priceless, especially one like this. This is also a school, which is key. This is an interesting one. This is called Zero. And this is what, we go there and, this is an expensive structure, I mean, people can't even afford a bag of cement. So we train all this knowledge, but how's anybody going to use it? So this concept here was, what could you build for pretty much free? This was called Zero. We only did one, and it was in the Philippines. But this is a structure that still provided most of the basics. This one isn't creating electricity. It is catching water. It is staying nice and cool. It is using natural and repurposed material. And there it is. And it's looks a little strange there, but this is just made out of found and salvage material, where we could get people into it, for free, essentially. There's the interior, and way more substantial in a typhoon than what, the typical wood and metal roof construction that is the rest, is what most people in the village are living in. And then we just gave it to the community. Well, we just gave all this to the community. There's a better shot of that Zero space.
Wow.
And the roof structure and everything. That's
beautiful.
Yeah. So trying to bridge, this economic gap too is a tricky thing. I mean, there's so many tricky things, and all right. Comalapa did a lot of work in Guatemala. And this is one early on that we first started to actually charge volunteers to come and work. And then that money became what funded the project. I remember when I first presented that to our administration, then they were like, no, Phil, nobody's ever going to do that. Well, guess what? People were knocking down the door to do this, and it worked very well, and we went back twice. Now, these we donated. I just got these shots off the internet today because I didn't have any. But these we donated. We did it twice. We had a building up top, and we donated that to a family. And then we donated this one to a family. Big group of people working on it. But sort of what happened inadvertently, and there's the two buildings. The first one we gave to these people here, Maria and her kids, and we seem like a good thing. Here I'm just sort of ceremonially handing the keys over, but in the end, was interesting that she made a lot of textiles and sold them. I can't see that. And then as soon as we had given them, the concept was, okay, well, all our kids and everything couldn't go to school. Everybody's having to make textiles. It's really the only source of income for women in Guatemala, a lot of women. And so, the community learned that the goal was give them this house will take care of them. Then the kids can go to school. And yes, that did work. But Maria lost a lot of sales because people in the community felt like, oh, well, these people just gave you a house. And there was like jealousy there, and so people quit buying her textiles. So inadvertently, we did have some negative impact on the family's life. And so, now try to focus on schools, community centers, handing out houses. As it seemed like a great idea, but there's all these layers of things you learn.
Like culturally, there's all this stuff.
And there's a lot to consider culturally.
Phil, I would have you go forever, but we have the next workshop about to stop.
Yeah. Okay.
I was going to say, is there any way we could get access to the PowerPoint, or if anybody has questions, they can get a hold of you?
Okay. So yes, please, you can email me just directly, Phil, Phil, at earthship.com.
Yes.
And
I don't want you to go.
I don't want to either. And I want to plug one thing real quick. I know that my time is up. But, right now we're pretty heavily involved at the school in Haiti. Wow. And so we've done one session where you can see we built this thing in a month and we have a local team that we paid, and we did an academy and everything. And now we're going to go back for just a 4-week workshop. And so I could even get this flyer out to anybody that's interested if you want to just spread the word or whatever. But if anybody's interested in coming, we will be there October 18th to November 12th. It's an amazing project in a place that really, really, really needs it. It's an established school. They get hurricanes, they get earthquakes. And the designs have evolved since our early efforts in Haiti. So this is kind of where we're at now.
And we'll help promote this on our social media as well, and on our newsletter.
Okay, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Would you be able to email me the flyer and the PowerPoint, or is the PowerPoint? No, because I wanted to see the slides we missed.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lauren can help me with that.
Okay. Yeah. We can put it in the Google Drive.
Okay.
Thank you so much. I know, where are you right now, Phil?
Oh, we're in Taos. This is our classroom. I'm at headquarters.
Oh, thank you to Lauren. Thank you to Phil. You guys are amazing. You know what? Thank you for everything you're doing, because it's changing the world for the better. And I think without people like you, you know what I mean? Like, we got to balance it out.
Oh, well, thanks for that. It's our passion for sure.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. We love you. Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
thank you.
Phil.